Hello, I'm Jeremy, and I wanted to talk about this video that Tim Pool put out about Chicago suburbs announce reparations. And Tim Pool talks about it a little bit as it being a good idea, that there's a reason for it to being good, and there's absolutely not, as far as I'm aware of. And it's the same thing. It's too general. They don't ever talk about specifics, and whenever you get into the specifics, I don't know of any good reason for it. So if you like what I'm doing and you want to subscribing and thumbs ups and Patreon and subscribe star, they all help me out a lot. I really need your help. Thanks. And so anyways, and I have links in the description below with this and some other videos. And I've heard the arguments for it. It's the strongest one that I've heard is that, well, because they were denied resources, land, money, whatever, then these grandchildren and great-grandchildren, they weren't able to make it. And it's like, well, there's no guarantee that they would have made it anyways. Because that doesn't happen anywhere with anyone for any reason. There's a saying that goes that a family's wealth is lost in 3 generations, and that's because the hard work that first generation did to earn the money, that those ethics aren't passed down to the previous or to the next generations. So, Grandpa and Grandma worked really hard and they saved their money and they were really diligent with it. But their kids didn't learn it because they had a completely different lifestyle, and they went to mom and dad to get money. And then the grandkids, they really had it spoiled rotten from grandpa and grandma, and so it's gone. And I've heard stories like this. So I've gone to the bank and I've talked to loan officers before, and they're like, oh yeah, they're just full of horror stories of trust fund kids where they've got money from their family and they just blow it off like crazy. And what they do is that, especially whenever the parents care and they're recognizing that their children are just complete morons, they'll put their inheritance in a trust, and then they'll siphon the money away in snippets. So in that way they can try to make the money last the entire life cycle of their child, which can't always happen, because sometimes you can still take it to court and try to get the entire money, and you can you don't know how long the kid is going to live, and there's a few other situations that kind of go along with that. And so, but we know that reparations don't work on several levels. First and foremost is that people have been winning lotteries and they've been receiving inheritances forever. And the majority of people who get this, who have this kind of fortune happen to them, they lose it in record numbers. It's like 70%, and I've heard the numbers kind of all over, but it doesn't matter, because it's not the numbers that you need to pay attention to, it's the reasons behind it. They have the same story over and over again. It's that they don't know how to say no to people, because they have their friends and family coming out of the woodwork with their hands out. It's because it's undeserved money. It's like, what did you do for it? So I could use help too. And so they don't know what to do. If you do ever happen to win the lottery or get an inheritance, here's some things that you should do. One is that you should fall off the map, and you need to take care of yourself first. It's kind of like the saying goes, how can you help someone take a splinter out of their eye whenever you have a log in yours? So take care of yourself first, and you can start with medical. Just get complete physicals and checkups, braces, vision, the whole works, the whole kit and caboodle, everything. And then set yourself up for retirement. And then look at buying a house. After you've taken care of kind of the necessities, then look into the fun stuff. Prioritize this stuff. Don't talk to anybody. Cut yourself off. I just finished watching several videos where these people are talking about how they're getting hounded and they're getting threatened. So you vanish yourself off, you sit down, and you need to watch those videos, read some articles, and then you need to make a list of the most important things to do, and you start with yourself and your friends and your family who are in your life, not like your cousin twice removed, or somebody who sat in math class 2 seats over and a row or 2 ahead of you or something like that. No, none of that crap. But people don't know how to say no. It's one of the problems that also happens in management. It's like 50% of managers fail, and it's because of the same stuff. It's because they don't know how to regulate people. Because being in a managerial position is difficult, because you have to tell people all kinds of bad news. oh, I have to write you up for an evaluation, or I'm having to write you up because of misconduct, or I'm just flat out having to fire you, or you're having to call somebody up, why aren't you in for work, why are you late? And there's a bunch of negativity that goes along with that, so you kind of have to have thick skin. That's why a lot of people don't move up to management, or they move up and then they fail at it. And so, again, the same thing with minimum wage and all these other kind of issues with money is just because that you get this money, it's not magic. It doesn't change you. If you don't have it's not going to increase your IQ. It's not going to give you good work ethics. It doesn't mean that you're magically going to become a financial wizard. So those are lots of reasons right there as to why people don't. So one of the things that also happens with people who have drug addictions is that whenever this does happen to them, this is what kills them, because they have more than enough money or they overdose, and it happens constantly. This is the same thing happens with people who just have alcoholism or drug abuse problems right now. Whenever they get money, maybe they are well put together enough to have a job, or whenever they're getting some kind of check from the government in some form, some kind of welfare benefits or whatever, they're gone and they spend their money all in just a few days and they wake up in a ditch somewhere. I've known plenty of people where that exactly happened to them. The Army is a great example of that. There were plenty of guys that first weekend with a paycheck, it was just gone. They just decimated their entire paycheck, and then the rest of the month that they were broke. So, for example, there was one guy who, man, I really liked him. He was really funny. He was really nice, but man, he couldn't handle his alcohol at all. And by the end of that first weekend, he was dead broke. It's like, come on, you got to go with us to Spain. You know, we're over here in Europe. It's never going to happen again. He's like, I don't have money for this. And I was like, look, just put some money aside, however you need to do it. You can have more than one account at your bank. Just do whatever. We went to Spain. The very first night we were there, he went out and he drank every last bit of it. And so they had side trips that you could do. So like one of them was you could go see the bullfights and you could go scuba diving. I covered it for him because it's like, I don't want you to miss out on this. This was the reason for coming. This is exactly what I'm talking about in Jordan Peterson's book, 12 Rules for Life, where they do a 800-mile trip, 400 miles there, 400 miles back. Whenever they get there, they do absolutely nothing different than what they could have done back home. They smoke pot and they drink beer. And it's like, why did you make the trip? You wasted all that time and energy for nothing. And there are tons of guys in the Army who did that constantly. And, you know, it's like, I don't feel sorry for you one damn bit, because you can't say a damn thing to me. You know why? Because we get paid exactly the same. But you're a moron who makes dumb decisions, and so you don't do anything. You never leave the barracks. I was traveling around all over the place. Because it's like, it's no cheap. It's not going to get any cheaper than that, because we're there in Europe, so that brings everything close. You don't have to fly over an ocean every single time that you go do it. So I have a couple of videos. I have one with Thomas Sowell talking about reparations, and it's like, how do you even start to do something like that? Because you're talking about giving money to people who were slaves. Well, you know what? Not every single person was a slave owner. So, for example, my grandparents and my great-grandparents, none of them were. They worked on farms, and they were doing all this. My grandmother told me a story that whenever she was like 4 years old, because this was back in the day, she said whenever she was young, that she could remember whenever they were still riding around on horses. And they just lived out there in the country. There was no running water. There was no electricity. There was none of that stuff. And it took her 2 weeks of working out there in the fields for her to get enough money together for her to buy her own first pair of shoes. You know why? Because they didn't have school back then. They didn't have electronics. They didn't have video games and TVs and movies and all this other stuff. So what did kids do if they had absolutely nothing to do? They went and they worked. What do you think they did? You can Google it right now, and you can pull up black and white pictures. In fact, I'm going to do that right now. And so here we go. We have pictures of kids from all around the world who are working mines. Some of these are present day, but some of these are back in the day, because they did not have schools. Schools have not always been around. Schools were a thing that were only for the elite people. All children, and some of these, you know, like this guy's an adult. I mean, he's obviously a head taller than the rest of these kids. So there are adults who are mixed in with them. You know, it's kids. This is what kids did. A lot of them back in the day. You know, here's a little kid, and as far as I know, he's working with his dad there. They also worked in all kinds of factories. They worked out on the farm. So all my uncles are farmers, and my cousins growing up, that's what they did. They worked out on the farm. And I helped them. And we were young. We were in elementary school, because it takes nothing to drive a tractor up and down the fields, back and forth. It is so boring. And back whenever I was a little kid, man, we were big stuff because we had tape decks. They just came out. It was no longer that 8-track crap. And if you were really lucky, you were working close enough to a town where you could get a radio signal, which most of the time you weren't, because you were in the country. It's like there was nothing special about it. You were in the middle of nowhere. Nobody was out there. It could take hours sometimes for somebody just to be able to drive out there to you to where you're at. And so, my grandmother and my grandfather on both sides, none of them had slaves. You know why? Because it's the exact same thing today. The people who had who were slave owners, who owned slaves, they were the 1%. They were the mega wealthy who did this stuff. It's like, well, how many people live in mansions today? Well, it's the same 1% who lived on plantations back then. It's like it's always been the same throughout history, where it's a minority of people who have wealth to do this stuff. It's ridiculous. So, and then what do you do with Africans who've come over after slavery ended? And what about all the other slaves in history? So another example is that I'm Welsh. That's where my ancestry goes back to, and they're slaves. And that's because one of the things that the British did to hold the Welsh captives was that they built castles all over the place to keep the Welsh from uprising, and that's why there's more castles per square mile in Wales than in any other part of the world. Slavery is absolutely nothing new that happened. It was something that had been going on. I mean, there were Romans who were capturing slaves, and they were using them for all kinds of labor stuff. They captured Christians and they fed them to lions. What are you talking about? This is just a bunch of virtue signaling nonsense from people who don't know what they're talking about, and they're just making a buck off of it and screwing everybody over in the process. So I have a video here from Thomas Sowell talking about exactly this, how slavery's gone on all over the place and how you can't pay for this. And then there's another one from PragerU where this guy talks about how, yes, even with slavery, with his great-grandfather or his great-great-grandfather, and that how his family did well, and it's because it's more work. And you can't tell me that this is going to do anything for poor people of color, because you know what? There are poor white people too. Well, what about them? What about their distraughted lives? What are you going to do for them? Why are you just picking on one? It's like there are more white people who are living in poverty than ever today, and I'm sure that there are plenty of them where they did come from rich families and they lost it. It's because money guarantees you absolutely nothing. It's just like if you go out and you give a homeless person a house, they're not going to know what to do with it. They're going to lose it. They're going to use it for nefarious actions. A person who's homeless, they have like 50 major problems wrong with them. They burn their bridges, they don't have friends and family, they have drug and alcohol addictions, they have a poor education, they have failing health, they have a whole slew of things that's going wrong with them. That's how it is, though, with every single person in poverty. They don't have a few things that are wrong with them. They have several, and they're bad. And throwing money at it doesn't get their problems solved. It doesn't do anything for them. It does not change this. It does nothing. It changes nothing in here. It changes nothing in here. And so, yeah, it's the whole reparations thing is a scam. It's nonsense. As far as I'm aware of, that's my thinking on it right now as of today. But there's no reason why we should not know the truth to all of this stuff. The information is in, that the arguments have been made, and I've heard nothing that's anywhere close to being reasonable from the opposite side as to why we should have reparations at all. So if you do have something, man, post it down in the comments section. Let's see what we can do. But if you're tired of the lies, I've got a wonderful idea, quite a few of them, though, to handle and to deal with the truth. So if you care about the truth, then like, subscribe, give a thumbs up, because we're going to deal with it. So thanks a lot for watching. We'll catch you later. Bye.